Hey everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios, brought to you by official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson's The Missing, available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Coming soon, Missing 2 by Mia Molson's The Double the Suspense, Double the Fun. Check it out on Amazon. Also brought to you by The Sweet Psalmist by Serena Wagner, based on the life of King David, including 30 exquisite paintings and more. Check out the Life of David now on Amazon. Keyword Sweet Psalmist Serena Wagner. And brought to you by his sensei of swing, Eric Diamond, with his latest All of Me, featuring the title track, I've Got a New Heartache. New music coming soon to your favorite podcast platform. Check it out, ericdiamondmusic.com. We're here with an amazing lady who is an author and daughter of a Holocaust survivor, also lactation consultant, childbirth education, and also a doula and more. She has been collecting family stories since childhood and also has a new book, a very deeply personal story that's a true story of her father and her family, an experience and a heartfelt story, which is enduring the quest to know the story and struggle to understand how her father survived as a young Jewish boy in Belgrade, where Nazis murdered 9% of the Jewish people. Talk more about it in the book Hidden in Plain Sight. Live, ladies and gentlemen, Plus Studio, somewhere in beautiful Boston, Massachusetts, the amazing author and daughter of a Holocaust survivor with the book Hidden in Plain Sight, the multi-talented Julie Brill. Julie, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Mike. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, it's great to have you on board as well, Julie. So you're an author and daughter of a Holocaust survivor, also lactation consultant, childbirth educator, and doula. You've been collecting family stories since childhood, and you have a new book, which is a deeply personal story. That's a true story of your father and your family experience and heartfelt story, which is a book called Hidden in Plain Sight. And before getting on, Julie, tell us how I first got started.
Yeah. So, like you said, I feel like I've been collecting family stories since what I was little. I don't even remember the first time I heard my father's stories, and I knew they were important. I would listen really hard, and they were his stories of the war in Yugoslavia, and he was not quite 3 when it started. So they were
Mm.
the stories of a very young child, and I was a very young child, and so I could just imagine what he was thinking. The stories were so vivid. There's one story where he was fleeing the city after the bombing. Civilians were just leaving in mass. There was not a working sewer system, and the Germans were coming in, and they didn't know what was going to happen. And they were walking out on the train tracks to the relative safety of the countryside. And he was riding on the shoulders of his older cousin. And I could just imagine, like, sitting up high. I know what that view is, looking down on the adult heads, people everywhere, all walking in the same direction, all carrying their belongings. I almost felt like it happened to me. And so I was absorbing these stories and asking questions and listening really hard, and I couldn't fit them into a broader narrative. So as I got older, I would learn stories about the Holocaust in Hebrew school, and of course, we studied Anne Frank in Holland, and what happened to the Jews in Germany and Poland. And what I understand now is the story in Serbia, where my father and his family were, was very different than what happened in Central and in Western Europe. So I could never make sense of it. He would talk about my grandmother visiting my grandfather in a concentration camp in the center of the city. And we learned, camps were far away. You went there in boxcar trains. You couldn't have visitors. Like none of the stories made sense. And so I always thought, these are our family stories and they don't fit into the bigger narrative. I don't know how it makes sense. And then much later in 2017, with my kids grown, I had an empty nest, I had time, and I started to research and try to figure out how do these stories fit into the bigger narrative. And that's the basis of the book, Hidden
Mm-hmm.
in Plain Sight.
And I think that sounds like you really collected a lot and had some memories and everything else. And was it one exact precise moment that simply influenced you into what you're doing for your rest of your career and especially into your book?
Yeah, so I don't know if there's an exact moment. I feel like everything in my life led up to it. So as a kid, I was fascinated by these stories. I was learning everything I could about the Holocaust. I was reading all the books I could at the time. This is like around 1980 or early 1980s. I'm like a preteen. And then I gave birth to my own kids in the 90s, and I just sort of turned it off. Like, I don't want to think about the Holocaust. It's too horrible to imagine. I could now identify with it as a parent. So it was awful to think about it as a child, but maybe as awful or more awful to think about being a parent in the Holocaust. So I didn't think about it as much as I could not think about it for a long time until my kids were grown. I would say, I guess, that the moment really was that empty nest. You come home and it's just the dog. There's time, there's quiet, and I really started to do the research. And also, a lot of the research was only newly available. So there are new documents being released all the time. I thought history is a thing that happened. There's no more information about it. It's in the past. But that's not true. There's just new information coming up all the time. So I was able to find a lot of family documents in German and in Serbian, and translate them and learn more and more about what had happened.
Hmm. Also made me think of the movie Schindler's List as well, too, talking about the whole thing, what in the Holocaust and everything. How accurate do you think that was in terms of what your father was talking about along Schindler's List? Do you think that was accurate, what really happened, or was some like faults or anything like that, maybe to clear up?
Yeah, I mean, I think Schindler's List was a huge moment in time when it came out in the 90s, excuse me, um, because it really brought the Holocaust into the popular discussion, at least in the US, right? Steven Spielberg was such a big director and this big Hollywood film. And I think for a lot of people, it was the first time they started thinking about it. I think for me, it was the first time I saw, the story being depicted on big screen. And it's a story that's so engrossing. It just draws you in. Um, I think it's true, as far as I know. There are so many stories, right? If there were 9 million Jews living in Europe at the start of the Holocaust, there are 9 million stories. So part of what makes the movie interesting is it's such an unusual story, right? This Nazi, Schindler, was able to, be a bad guy and also a hero and save Jews in a particular way because of the opportunities he had with his factory. That's very different than my family story. In Belgrade, the Holocaust starts in 1941 with the
Mm.
bombing of Belgrade by the Germans. It's a surprise bombing, and that's actually my father's first memory. He's not even three,
Oh,
and he
wow.
remembers running in the street. He remembers being with his mother in the bomb shelter. He remembers the sounds of the bombs, the whistling. And then the Germans came in and they very quickly started registering the Jewish men, including my grandfather. And it's really basically over by the spring of 1942. The Germans say Belgrade, the capital city where my family was, Belgrade is Judenfrei. That's German for free of Jews. The U.S. didn't even come into the war until December of 41 with Pearl Harbor. So it's before like even the U.S. story is really starting. It's really over, at least where my family was. So I think it's a very different story. I wrote it because I think all the stories are important, and this story just really hasn't gotten out yet.
Hmm. And what are some of the parts that you have discovered that was not talked about by the media? Because you hear about the media side of it. Of course, you had all the stories. What happened with Hitler. The executions and parts tied to the Schindler List. What are some of the new information that just recently came out that what we didn't even know about, especially in the book?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. So, there's something called the Auschwitz paradox, and the idea is Auschwitz is a maybe the thing that people most identify with the Holocaust. People know about it because murder there happened on such a large scale. Over 1 million Jews were murdered there. It was a horrific place. But because it was happening on such a large scale, there were tens of thousands of survivors, mostly young men and women in their teens and 20s who could tell the story and who many of them went on to live long lives and tell the story and tell the story. And so we know those stories. What happened in Belgrade was so early and so complete. More than 90% of the Jewish population was murdered. There just weren't descendants and there weren't survivors to tell the story. And the story is a little bit of what I was saying before. The Germans came in, they registered the Jewish men, then they enslaved them. So my grandfather worked for the Reich. He was actually, I know this just recently from a document I found, a street pass. He was working repairing sewers. So he had been a clerk before the war. He had an office job. I picture him in kind of his office shoes, digging ditches and laying pipe. Slave labor, they had to do it 6 days a week. They didn't get paid,
Oh my
but they
gosh.
were able to come home and live in their homes at night. And my father remembers that. So that's like not a Holocaust story you hear. And then one day he didn't come home. And my father remembers that too. He remembers my grandmother wailing. So she was pregnant with my aunt. She, of course, had no idea what had happened. It's like pre-internet, they didn't have phones. They couldn't go outside and talk to neighbors because of the curfew. She didn't know. She, of course, assumed that he had been killed. And what had actually happened was he was being held in a camp in the center of the city. And that camp had nothing. We have letters where the Jewish community is begging for straw. Could the men please have straw to sleep on at night? They were just sleeping on the floor. They had no blankets. They had no food. And they were reliant on the Jewish women, in this case for my grandmother, to bring them food. And my grandmother did that, walking. She couldn't take the train because of the laws. And so that's, a different kind of story, but very common for the stories in Eastern Europe. More Jews were actually murdered outside the camps than in them. We just don't hear about it as much.
And do you think there might have been smaller camps besides Auschwitz and some of the other camps? Auschwitz is a big one. Do you think there might have been like smaller camps, mini camps, micro camps, or even like a small outhouse or a small farmhouse? That could have happened.
Very much so. I mean, we visited the place that was the camp where the Jewish men were held, where my grandfather was held in Belgrade. And it's just these two-story buildings, just long, low buildings, and a little yard. It's a tiny area in the middle of the city. And so I think there were a lot of those, and we just haven't heard about them. It was interesting visiting that one because it's not a museum. Weren't signs the first time we went. The grass wasn't mowed. There were stray dogs walking around. I mean, we think that these places have really been preserved, and that's not true in Eastern Europe for a lot of the smaller ones.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that had to be brutal conditions, unlike you hear with the mainstream with Auschwitz, of course, Schindler's List, and some of the things in media, and also made me think of the Diary of Anne Frank. She was also prominent as well too. And how close do you think that was compared to stories with the Diary of Anne Frank?
Yeah, I mean, that was a story I was fascinated with as a kid. Anne Frank and I happened to have the same birthday. I kind of like identified with her. I imagined what it would be like to not leave your house for days and months and years and be so afraid. There were hidden families and, hidden children all across Europe. So that was a thing that happened, for sure, and made it is maybe the most famous example of it. A different story from my family story, where the title of it is Hidden in Plain Sight. And I'll just hold up the cover if people are watching the video and can see it. This is a picture of my father as the little boy. That's my aunt, the little
Okay,
girl.
can you bring it a little closer, please?
Of course. Does that, I'll
Oh
try to
my
keep.
gosh, that's a great picture. I love it. That's a great picture.
We had these four pictures when I was a kid of my father's family before the war and during the war that somehow survived. This was the one I was most fascinated in with, like, how can this be, right? So, my grandfather was murdered. We now know from my research it was November 1941. We never had a date. My grandmother never knew what happened. She just went to the camp one day with food, and the gates were open. The camp was empty. My grandfather had disappeared. That was all she knew. And she held on to the belief for years, maybe her whole life, that he was somewhere and he was alive and he would come back. Um, so I think she took that picture of the children on the street for him. That we have it is a miracle. That it was ever taken was amazing. It's not like now where everyone has a cell phone and you can take pictures of your lunch. Cameras were illegal for civilians to have in occupied Europe. The Germans did not want civilians snapping pictures on the street of what they could see. Somehow she had someone take this picture, and the biggest miracle is that these children are standing on the street, and what they're not doing is hiding, right? That's where the title comes from, Hidden in Plain Sight. And I just was always amazed. Like, but you were Jewish and you were standing on the street and there's a pig. Like, how can that be? And that question just is really what fueled the search. So I
And
won't
of
say
course,
the answer because it's spoilers, but it's in the book how they survived.
right, exactly. And more in the book on Hidden in Plain Sight with Julie Brill. We'll get to more on that. But first, listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at SonicWebStudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960 or email to support at SonicWebStudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show, get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, time to give official shout out to our official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson-Zia. If you love fast-paced mysteries, you love Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon paperback and ebook. Missing is fast-paced and intriguing with an unforgettable twist. Takes place in 4 countries, 2 strangers, 1 target, where truth is illusion and those who love you to first go missing. It's available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing by Mia Molson-Zia has gone great reviews. And Eve 11 enjoys by Howard celebrities, including Joanna Cassie, Forrest Riley, and many others. So grab your copy today for It Goes Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon. Coming soon, Missing 2 by Mia Molson-Zia, double the suspense, double the fun. Check it out on Amazon. Also, Mike Wagner Show is brought to you by A Sweet Psalmist by Serena Wagner, based on the life of King David, including 30 exquisite paintings in King David Psalms. The Sweet Psalmist gives a new perspective on David through the Psalms he wrote and his time as a shepherd growing up in his complicated yet turbulent relationship with King Saul. It's a story of love, betrayal, repentance, hope, and more. Check out The Sweet Psalmist by Serena Wagner on Amazon. Keyword Sweet Psalmist, Serena Wagner. Also brought to you by a sensei of swing, Eric Diamond, with his latest release, All of Me, featuring the title track, I've Got a New Heartache, Bring Me Sunshine, and more. Eric is a multi-award winning artist, inducted in numerous Hall of Fames, entertainer, album of the year, and releasing a new CD soon. Check out the amazing Eric Diamond today at ericdiamondmusic.com and follow on Facebook, YouTube, and your favorite platform worldwide. Check it out, ericdiamondmusic.com. Also, check out the Mike Wagner Show, mikewagnershow.com, 40 podcast platforms, heard in 100 countries. Take us with you on any mobile device. Follow us on Spotify, YouTube, iHeart, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and more. For great gift ideas, go to amazon.com. Be sure to check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast, t-shirts, pop buckets, throw pillows, tote bags, hoodies. Makes great gifts 24/7. Go to amazon.com. Check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast. And for more great gift ideas, go to amazon.com/Mia Molson-Zia. Great books, merchandise, and more. And support the Mike Wagner Show on Anchor FM, PayPal, and the MikeWagnerShow.com. With his amazing author and daughter of a Holocaust survivor, also lactation consultant, childbirth educator, and doula Julie Brill here on the Mike Wagner Show. And you also have some work as well, too. And plus, you also have been a childbirth educator and lactation consultant for quite some time. Tell us more about that.
Sure. I got into it really while I was still in college. I started studying to be a midwife. I think it was a response to, this experience I had as the daughter of a child survivor of the Holocaust. I just wanted to go in the opposite direction. I wanted to choose life. I wanted to go someplace joyous. I now know it's much more complicated for many people. It's very difficult to have a baby in the postpartum period, but I just went towards what I thought was, just joy. So I studied as a midwife first. I worked as a doula. I teach childbirth classes virtually now, and I'm a lactation consultant. So I help people feed their babies, which is amazing work. Every family is really different, and I get to see them in this, raw, open time when they've just had a new baby.
Oh yeah, and I think that's a great time to do that. And that's the way to go these days, natural and everything. And you later also wrote some other books besides Hiding in Plain Sight. You had Round the Circle and Doulas Share Their Experience, and plus you had some essays as well too, like Harrods, The Forward, and Balkan Insight, and I think it's Killer, and also I'm just trying to say here, Hey Alma, and tell us more about those.
Yeah, so I wrote a book. It was an anthology 10 years ago called Round the Circle, Doulas Share Their Experiences. I think I'm the only person who ever followed up a doula anthology with a Holocaust memoir, but there you are. I wanted to really help new doulas that were coming up so that they wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel and learn everything the hard way, the way we did in the 90s when people didn't know what a doula was and we were literally spelling doula. What is it? They'd never heard the word before. So I imagined what it's like to go to a conference or workshop where everybody's sitting in a circle, just sharing information that they had learned. And I asked a whole lot of doulas, some I knew well, some I didn't know at all. Hey, will you be part of this book? And 22 other doulas said yes. So they all wrote about the things they were most passionate about or most focused on, and that became the book.
Mhm.
So that was another great experience, very collaborative, very different than writing a memoir and kind of coming out on your own. So that was a good way to start.
Right. And what exactly is a doula? I forgot to ask you that.
Yeah, so there are really two kinds of doulas when we're talking about pregnancy and birth. There are also death doulas, so that's a different category. But there are labor doulas or birth doulas that are focused on that immediate time where someone is in labor, they're giving birth, and the immediate postpartum. And there are also doulas who help families afterwards in the postpartum time or even beyond, with helping them learn how to do baby care or helping them with cooking or doing errands or those kinds of things. Some doulas do both, but it's sort of trying to create the village we're supposed to have, but a lot of us don't anymore,
Mhm.
so people
Right,
aren't
exactly. Okay.
solo.
Right. You also talked about, writing from doula to Holocaust and everything like that. And we talked about the book Hidden in Plain Sight. What was that exact moment that simply prompted you into writing the book Hidden in Plain Sight?
Yeah, so I think the moment was when I realized this book does not exist. I didn't set out to write this book. I really just wanted to read a book about the Jews of Serbia. And I remember being in the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., in their gift shop. And, it's a giant museum on the mall. And all the books are arranged alphabetically by country. And I'm going down the list and I get to Y. I'm looking for Yugoslavia and there's nothing under Y. It's empty. And I thought, like, even in this place that just has books on the Holocaust, there is no book on Yugoslavia. That book doesn't exist. And that was, kind of the impetus to, well, you're supposed to write the book you want to see in the world. Okay, here we go. And I just found out recently they are going to carry the book. The book comes out April 23rd, and it's been approved to be in the bookshop. So that was a big moment for me, kind of a full circle. Now there'll be a book under Y.
It sounds like it, and it made me think too with what happened with your family in Serbia, and everybody thought it was just Germany. So it came out in Serbia. What are some of the other countries that you researched that the Holocaust happened was just in Germany, and out came Serbia? What are some of the other countries, maybe lesser known, that the Holocaust happened?
Yeah, I mean, so my focus has been on Serbia, but the Germans occupied in different ways all of what was then Yugoslavia. They broke it back up into different segments, but so all over Yugoslavia, Croatia, Bosnia, etc. The Holocaust happened in Greece, which is I think we don't think a lot about.
Oh wow!
Um, that was a Sephardic community that lived there, meaning that they had originally come from Spain and they spoke Ladino, which is a derivative of Spanish, kind of Jewish Spanish. The Holocaust was in Denmark and some of the Scandinavian countries. We don't think about that. So I think our focus has really been Germany, Poland, France, Holland, because that's where Anne Frank was, and we haven't heard as much about the other places.
It also made me think that thank God it didn't happen in the United States because I remember reading about Hitler was ready to invade the U.S., but their track got pretty much stopped in England as well too, where we celebrate was it V-Day or where it was England and France all came together to put a stop to it.
Right, right. I mean, his plan was to take over the world. And I think there's stories about like we didn't know how bad it was, German submarines being off the coast of the US and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Right, and it's also very intense as well too. And we glad got the clip as well too. And more about Hidden in Plain Sight with Julie Brill. Just 1 minute. You listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Brought to you by official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson Missing. Also brought to you by Sweet Psalmist by Serena Wagner, based on the life of David. Check out Sweet Psalmist Serena Wagner keywords on Amazon and the Sensei Music Eric Diamond with All of Me and More, ericdiamondmusic.com and your favorite podcast platform. We'll be back with the multi-talented Julie Brill of Hidden in Plain Sight after this timeout. We're back with author Julie Brill of Hidden in Plain Sight here on the Mike Wagner Show, and just a couple of things. What do you want the readers to get from the book?
I mean, the book can be read on a lot of levels. So, on one level, it's the story of me, just kind of an average American trying to find out my family history. I think that's something that a lot of people can resonate with. And in some ways, it's a how-to and kind of just like a plea. Like, if you're interested in your family story, now is the time, right? For me, it was this perfect moment. My father was able to share stories with me still. I can go to him and ask a question for clarification. And by the way, everything he remembered as a small child was 100% accurate, backed up by the research I did, but also all of this new research that was available. So, if you're interested in your family, that's the broad story. Find out your family. Here's my family story. The specific story is there's no family exactly like mine. Here is what happened to me and my family. This is what it was like to grow up as the child of a Holocaust survivor. This is my relationship with the history. This is what I found out. This is how I became closer to my father, through this research. I really feel like I gave him this gift that was his own family history. So usually that gets passed down parent to child, right? My father lost a lot of that, even things that had happened before the war he didn't know, because he didn't have his father to tell him. And I was able to find it and give it back to him. That was really rewarding. I talk about that in the book. We found family members we didn't even know to look for. We didn't know they existed. That was amazing. And we got to go to Serbia. There's actually three Serbian trips. With my daughters and my dad, and that was amazing. Like just to be welcomed by the Serbian community and understand that we are Serbian and things we had done, we did because we were Serbian, but I didn't know that. So it's a book that can be understood on a lot of levels. And of course, anybody who's interested in hearing about the Serbian story of the war and the Holocaust, here it is, as best as I could tell it.
Hmm. And you're doing a fantastic job of it. And where can we find your book at, Julie?
So thank you. So it comes out April 23rd. The best way to connect with me in the book is my website, which is Julie Brill, just my name.com. It's available in the usual places. So I love indie bookstores. If you have an indie bookstore near you, you can get the book through them. Bookshop is another great way to do it. Bookshop is a way to shop independently but online. Barnes and Noble, the big A, it's out there in all the places.
All right. Well, certainly check that out. We're with the multi-talented Julie Brill of Hidden in Plain Sight here on the Mike Wagner Show. Just a few more things. What else can we expect in 2025 and beyond?
This is the year when I'm getting this story out. I mean, I wrote this book because I wanted to tell the story. I didn't set out to write a memoir initially. I didn't want to talk about myself. I'm not that
Hmm.
introspective normally. I wanted to tell my family story and the bigger story of their community. The early feedback that I got was it should be a memoir. We should see you in it. We should follow you through the story, which I think is really good advice. So I've put in all this work. It's been since 2017. Now it's a chance to get it out into the world. So I hope your listeners will check it out. We were talking about where to buy it, but libraries are great too. If your library doesn't have it, ask for it to be there. There's a lot of ways to access it.
All right. We will certainly check that out. And who do you consider biggest influence in your career?
My career as a writer or as a
Just in
lactation,
general.
everything. So a lot of why I became a lactation consultant and a childbirth educator, I think, is because of my mom. My mom loved babies and loved being pregnant and would always point out pregnant women in the grocery store line when I was a kid, and just was so positive and excited about it. I mean, that was a gift for me. I understand now not everybody has that. And so that I think led to the work that I do, which I love.
Oh, that sounds amazing. We all love children, gotta say that. And what's the best advice you can give to anybody at this point?
I think if you have a book and you write it, just start. It always feels impossible. Somewhere there's a quote about writing a memoir is like climbing up a mountain if nobody made me do this. And I would think about that all the time. Why am I doing this? This is so hard. But if you want to, if you have an idea, follow through with it, do it. It's slow and steady, and you get there. And if you're interested in your family history, ask older relatives, record their stories, ask them the same questions in different ways, show them photographs, document, and then, go online. There's so much information in so many different ways now.
And a lot of it as well, too. It's so amazing. We're here with the multi-talented Julie Brill, the author of the book Hidden in Plain Sight here on the Mike Wagner Show. Julie, a very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely fantastic. Learned a lot. Looking forward to having you soon. Keep us up to date. Keep in touch. Laugh, have you back. Once again, what's your website? How do people contact you? Where can people purchase or check out your book?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike. This was fun. I'm glad we got together here. My website is just my name, so www.juliebrill with two L's, Brill, .com.
All right, we'll certainly check that out. Once again, Julie, a very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely fantastic. Looking forward to having you soon. Keep us up to date. Keep in touch. Love to have you back. We wish you all the best. And Julie, you definitely have a great future ahead of you.
Thanks so much, Mike. Thanks for having me today.